Welcome to this 7th video in the series on formatting long Word documents using word processing technology and features. If you haven't yet followed along in this playlist of videos, we've covered quite a lot of material by this point, particularly looking at different forms of formatting, including character formatting and paragraph formatting, as well as tab stops and other features that are specific to paragraphs like bullets and numbering. And in the last video, we got to one of the most powerful features in almost any word processing software available these days, which is styles. I recommend you go have a look at those if you haven't yet done so. In this video, however, we're going to look at another very powerful feature of most word processing software. Even though I'm showing you this on Microsoft Word, which is part of the Office suite, the same applies to Word for Mac, and as far as I'm aware, to OpenOffice and most other forms of contemporary mainstream word processing. Today, we're going to be looking at sections. So if styles are the little paint palette that you can use to paint different parts of your document in ways that are consistent and neat and professional looking, sections are how you can break your document up into different parts and individually control the properties of how the text sits on the page. So one of the first things we're going to start looking at is exploring a different ribbon on the top of the screen to the one that we've mostly focused on up until now. We've been primarily using the home ribbon, which includes fonts, paragraphs, and styles. And in the first video, we explored some of these ribbons for other features. Insert offers you the ability to add elements to your document, whether these are tables, pictures. Some features here are doubled up from layout, which we're going to be focusing on today, things like page breaks. But here you can put in things like graphs, or even links to websites, comments, and then headers and footers, which we will do in the next video, which relate to sections. But first we want to get a handle on what sections are and how they work. You can even add, this is quite a nice feature that has eventually been built into Microsoft Word, at least in the last 5 years or so, the ability to add equations and typeset mathematical forms, which was not very good in contemporary word processing software before. People used to have to use software like LaTeX. Most nerds probably still like to use LaTeX, but you can do some halfway decent equations in Word now. But these are different things you can add into your document. The draw ribbon, which is more of a freehand annotation tool, which I might use in something like this, a video, where I might want to go, oh, look, this part is a heading, whereas this part is a paragraph. And that might be the sort of thing I would do while presenting a video to you exactly like this one. But that's not really something you want to do when you're writing a thesis, only when you're making videos for YouTube. Design, if you recall, is just a set of predefined styles that are built into the software to try and get you a little bit closer to a look and feel you like without you having to define all your own styles from scratch, if that's what you want. But you'll see, even Microsoft themselves say, you can quickly change the look of your document by picking a new style set or design, and they change the font and paragraph properties of your document. But if you want the full Monty, if you really want absolute control over the look and feel of your whole document, use styles. And you guys already know how to do that because I showed you in the last video. The ribbon we want to look at today is this one, layout. This is the ribbon which gives us control about how the text sits on the page. You might recall from the first video that we had different ways of viewing our document: read mode, print layout mode, and web layout mode. And I stay in print layout mode because it is a WYSIWYG view. What you see is what you get. What appears on my screen is a likeness to what will come out of my printer. And I like that because, let's be honest, Lots of academics do unfortunately still print documents, especially long documents. When you have to read a 100+ page document, reading on the screen or annotating online can be extremely painful, especially if you have glasses or eye problems, or just want to get off screens for a little while. So it's not unlikely that your examiner, your supervisor, anyone else reading your document may print it, in which case you want it to print well. So we're looking at the moment in the print layout, and it's also a very useful layout for understanding how these different properties of sections work. When you start a new document, there is only one section, and it applies to the whole document. One of the ways that you can see your sections is by focusing on headers and footers, and we'll do more on headers and footers in the next video. But if you go to Insert, Header, and you say Edit Header, it will show you the main body of your document grayed out and a focus on the pieces of text at the bottom and top of the page. And you can see there that there is no section number. It just says header and footer, next page, header and footer, which means that these are all part of the same section. As you'll see in a moment when we start to add section breaks, if there's more than one section, it'll go section 1, section 2. All right, so you start with one section. I'm going to close the header and footer now. And sections have particular properties. For example, they have margins, which is about how close the text is placed to the edge of the paper. There are some defaults that you can use. Normal, which is 1 inch from each edge. 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. That's where that measurement comes from. Again, imperial hangover. There is narrow, which is 1/2 inch from bottom, top, left, right. There is moderate, which is 1 inch on the top and bottom, slightly less on the sides. There is wide, which is sometimes used in some books, which is 1 inch from the top and bottom, and a double inch, 2 inches from the left and right. This is very useful for people who have a lot of scribbling to do in margins. There's mirrored, which is used for printing a book layout, because the binding in the center of odd and even pages on a book means that a little bit of the paper gets gobbled up. Let's actually have a look at that. If I do mirrored, you can see that the first page, the left margin, let's use these drawing features. Why not? The left margin here, draw for me, please. Doesn't want to draw. Why does it not want to draw? Right. There we go. Is slightly wider than the right margin here because this is an odd page. I'm on page 1 of 22. But if I scroll down, you'll see now on the even pages, we have the other story. We have a slightly wider right than left margin. And of course, the reason for that is that when you print a book, the first page starts on the right. Just get this, I'm going to zoom this out until it presents me. Does not want to do this. It does not want to give me 2 pages side by side. There we go. I went view side by side. I'm going to delete my little doodles. I don't need to yet. But what you would do with a book is you would have a blank first page on the left, and then your odd page number 1 starts on the right hand side. And look, you can see even as I scroll, that would be pages 2 and 3, 4 and 5. And so you have to have a little bit more margin for the binding of the book, which will gobble up a little bit of paper in the middle, which is why you have these asymmetrical margins. And that is the layout, which is called mirrored. It's meant for printing books. We're going to go back to normal. And I'm also going to change my view back to my vertical view and delete my doodles. All right, so each section of a book has margins. It says how much space is around the text left blank on the outside. It also has an orientation. The default is portrait, so long side going up and down, short side across, but of course there's also landscape. I will show you a document in the last video of this series where there is literally a landscape document, a landscape page inserted into a portrait document, but I'll show you how to do that today. Each section can only either be portrait or landscape. It cannot be both. Each section also has a paper size, the default being A4 because that is what most of us work with. But there are other sizes here too, which are very useful because if you were printing on A5 or if you live in the States and you're doing letter size, these things are not standardized across the world. There are different sizes of paper. And this is where you would set the size of your paper for future printing. And finally, each section has a number of columns, and the default is one column. If you look at the way the text is arranged on this page, my computer is doing all sorts of funny things. It is very squeaky and grumpy this morning. There is a single column running from the top to the bottom of the page from margin to margin. And that is the default. But sometimes you might want to arrange your text in two columns with a gap in between. We're going to have a look at that today as well. Also, we have indents, and we've got extra paragraph stuff here. This is the same as the paragraph stuff you've seen before. It's just a duplicate. But we have a few more things here with the page setup. We have different kinds of breaks. Page breaks, column breaks, and text wrapping, which work within a section. And then section breaks, one of which will say, start a new section on the next page. Continuous, which means start a new section below. One that starts a new section on every even numbered page and start a new section on every odd page. You would only use even and odd breaks if you were doing something that needed eventually to be printed in a book format. So it's going to be bound in a book. The most important ones for us are page and column, next page, and continuous. Those are the 4 breaks that I think are really helpful for someone writing a dissertation. Line numbers are useful for proofreading in order to be able to say to an editor or a fellow author, page 10, line 21. But in general, we don't tend to use those really in academia. They would be something that you would use more perhaps in a legal argument, or perhaps if you're writing, say, a theatre script or a movie script. We don't tend to use line numbers very much. And then there's some settings here about how one hyphenates words that break across lines or pages. Again, I have never really found cause to use this when writing academic documents. Okay, let's have a look at how these sections work. I wanted to show you on my dummy document here. I'm going to restyle that back to my heading style. There we go. I'm going to break up my document into a different section for every chapter. If you go to View and you tick Navigation pane, you'll see that my document, because I've styled it well and I'm using heading styles correctly, has a whole bunch of, this one should be a heading 2, because I've already picked up that I've got an error here. There we go. All right, you can see on my, I'm not really sure why this has done this. There we go. I have 5 chapters, an introduction, conclusion, and references. And I want to make each of these a separate section. Why this is useful will become apparent in the next video when I show you headers and footers. Okay, what can I do? For example, I want to make sure that my new chapters always start on a new page. I have 3 options to do this. The first option is I can just add a normal page break. If I turn on my formatting, you can see, there it is. My word processor is telling me there's a page break here. Don't go like this to get it to the next page. Can you see what's happening in my navigation page there, by the way? Every single one of those new paragraphs I've just inserted was formatted with the style heading, even though it was a blank line. And because heading formatting and heading styles is picked up by my navigation pane and also by my future table of contents, which we'll look at in video 9, it starts to populate my table of contents and my navigation pane with blank lines. I don't want that. So that's number one, a really good reason to not use just empty paragraphs to create space. Use a page break. So I can just use a page break. It shoves the next section or the next chapter onto a new page, but it does not create a new section for me. So any features, any properties I apply to this section will apply to the next one as well. Another option I have is to go, no, please insert a next page section break. So this is a special kind of page break, which creates a new section for me. There it is. Can you see it says section break next page? And now this first part here is in a different section to this next part here. How can I see that? Remember, I told you can see sections when you open headings. Don't worry about same as previous. We'll look at that in the next video. So here you can see section 1, section 2. So section 1 is my introduction. Section 2 is chapter 1. Okay, that's pretty useful. An even more slick way of doing this is to build it into my heading style. Let me delete that section break we just inserted, close header and footer. Okay, let's get rid of that. Forgive me, I'm just trying to remove that section break. There we go. It's unfortunately stripped my heading of its style in the process of doing that. If I went heading, here's my heading style here in my styles tab, and I went, okay, modify style. I can add a few extra little bits to this. For example, I can go format, paragraph, line and page breaks, page break before, which makes sure that anytime I use heading 1, which I only use to designate the start of my chapters, it will automatically start it on a new page. So there's another way of doing it. But it's not a section break, it's only a page break. So today I'm going to show you to do this with explicit, hard inserted section breaks. Right, chapter 1 on a new section, please. Chapter 2. Can you see that chapter 2 already by default starts on a new page? If I insert it on the same page as chapter 2, it's going to bump it over to the next page. No, it doesn't actually. That's good. It puts it where it should be. There it has come up there. So visually, it doesn't change anything. But from a control perspective of being able to tweak each section to have different properties, that is very useful. Chapter 3, same thing, please. Chapter 4, can you see how I'm using my navigation pane to jump through my document instead of scrolling? I can only do that because I've styled my document properly. Chapter 5, conclusion. Please put that in a new section. Thank you very much. And references in a new section. Okay, let's start at the bottom here where we find ourselves, because this is a nice way to show you why you would want to carve up a long document into separate sections. One of the reasons is so that you can control the headers and footers of each section independently. And another is so that you can control other qualities of the sections independently, including margins and page orientation. For example, I often find that for the readability of the main text, you want quite large margins with quite a wide line spacing. It makes it easier to read. But for your references, you don't want the text taking up that much real estate. It doesn't need to be as explicit in terms of giving lots of space around the edges. So you can see here I'm in section 8. Section 7 was the conclusion. Section 8 is my references. I'm in a different section. And for this section, I'm going to go layout, margins, narrow. That's nice. Now it's not taking up quite so much paper. I can get more references on the same page. But can you see that the margins here and the margins below are quite different? That's really useful. In fact, for example, if I had front matter on my document, let's say I want to have a preamble. I want to have abstract, table of contents, table of authorities. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to go, all right, page, insert a new page section break. And here, in front of my section break, I'm going to go fantastic. Title. I'll put the title here. This is the title of my fantastic thesis. Subtitle. Put in too many characters. Sadly, it's not that fantastic. Right. Then I want to go to the next page, but stay inside the same section. I want all my front matter to be one section. So I'm going to add a normal page break. Okay. And here I am now on a new page, but I'm still in section 1. See, still in section 1. And I'm going to go, okay. Close header and footer. Thank you very much. Right here, I'm going to go abstract. Sorry about that, jumping around. And I will go blah, blah, blah. This is my abstract for my dissertation. I don't want to copy that section break all the way across there. It's causing me a little bit of stickiness. I'm going to copy my blah, blah until it looks like a bit of an abstract. There you go. Bit of an abstract there. New page. I'm going to go table of contents here. Table of authorities here. I'm going to show you those in video 9. But I want this front material to have a wider margin. So I will go, okay, I'm in section 1. My introduction only starts in section 2. That's great. So in section 1, it's a pity you can't see what section you're in until you expose the header and footer. That would be quite nice. We should tell them that. Put it in the bar at the bottom. What section am I in? I want to have a slightly wider margin here. So I'm going to go layout, margins, wide. All right, don't particularly like that, but I can do it. Back to moderate. Okay, we'll go for moderate here. Okay, so you can start to see how I'm building different sections with different qualities on how the text gets put on the page. Another really useful part about this is that you can control the page numbering differently in each section, or you can link them up all together. For example, I want my preamble to have, say, Roman numeral numbers. So I'm going to go, okay, and we'll do this a little bit more in the header and footer, but I'm going to open up my footer. And when I open up my header and footer, I get a special ribbon that only shows when that section of my document is highlighted. And I'm going to go, okay, put a page number in at the bottom of the page. And I have a few options. I can say different for first page because I don't want a page number on my pretty front page. So different for first page, and it cleans it off. And it starts at number 2 on my second page. Thank you very much. You can also do different odd and even pages, which is again what you'd do if you were doing a book. We're not doing a book, so we're not going to look at that. And here I'm going to go, okay, page number, format page numbers. At the moment, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4. I wanted to go Roman numerals. And I'm going to go, okay. So different first page. Keep my nice front pretty page squeaky clean. Thank you very much. And there we go. We start at, let's zoom in a little bit for you to see what's happening here. 2, 3. Now, you can see here, it says same as previous. And we're going to do we'll do this again in the next video, but this is what I can do then is I go to section 2 and I'm like, no, I don't want section 2 to have the little Roman numerals. I want it to start again with normal numbers, and I want it to start again counting from 1. If you go up here to your header and footer, you can see navigation, link to previous. Click that off. Watch what just happened. It says same as previous. So this means that each section 1 sets the tone, section 2 just copies what section 1 did, section 3 copies what section 2 did, etc. But what I can do is I can go unlink them, make this something different, and I'm going to select my page number. I'm going to go page number, and I'm going to go format page number 1, 2, 3. It says here continues from previous section. Nope, I want you to start again at 1, please. And there you go. Close header and footer. And this is very nice because my preamble, scrubbed an ugly page number off the front, my preamble goes in little Roman numerals, but then my actual text starts again from 1. And because I decoupled section 2 from section 1, but I didn't decouple 3 from 2, 4 from 3. So the chain of copying formatting or copying page numbers from 3 onwards is the same. So section 2 is not linked with previous. Oh my. Someone ought to tell the Lorem Ipsum people that their text, which is supposedly good for typesetting, is a pain in the bum for spell checking. Didn't ask you to do that. All right, there we go, header and footer. Can you see here it says same as previous, same as previous. So sections 4 and 5 are still connected, 5 and 6 are still connected, which means that basically my page numbers from section 2 onwards are going to cascade through the rest of my document. You can see we're still going up in normal numbers all the way through to the conclusion. And perhaps I'd do the same again here for references. I'll do that in the next video when we start looking at headers and footers more closely. But what I wanted to demonstrate here is that while you have the power to change margins, page numbers, even columns and orientation in each section separately, the default is that each new section copies what the last one did. And you have to decouple them, especially for things that are counting, like page numbers, in order to start again for something fresh. So just remember, look for that link with previous, and we'll look at that more in the next video on headers and footers. Another useful thing in sections is the ability to insert a differently oriented page into a document or columns. Let's start with columns. For columns, you are going to use a different kind of section break called a continuous section break. So we've only so far used the next page section break, which is cutting up our document into unique sections, and each section starts on a brand new page. But you don't have to do that. You can have a section in the middle of a page too, which is where the continuous comes in. I'm going to insert a continuous section break at this point in my document. So this is a different section from this. And then I'm going to insert a section break again here instead of a carriage return, which is a paragraph break. There we go. And I'm just going to highlight the text inside this unusual section in a different color so that you can see it stand out on the screen. Okay, so in between the two continuous section breaks is the blue text. And because I've put these continuous section breaks in, I can go, well, okay, the black text at the top has got 1 column. the black text at the bottom has got another column, one column, but I'm going to make the blue text into 2 columns. I go layout, columns, in 2 columns, please. And between my 2 continuous section breaks, Word renders this as 2 columns. All right, so that looks quite nice. And with the columns, you can do all sorts of things like properties. You can say how wide you want them, how many columns, the spacing between them. Do you want a line between? Apply it to this section. From this point forward, the whole document. You get quite a lot of control about what your columns can and can't do. Let's say I wanted my column. I don't want this orphaned end of the sentence from the left-hand column to start at the top of the right-hand column. This is where you get a column break. I'm going to insert a column break here. And that basically says, stop this column and run into the next one. So it's kind of like a page break, but for columns. You can only use it, though, when you have 2 or more. Otherwise, it just does the same thing as a page break. So that's how you can use columns. For example, let's do the same thing here. Instead of having 2 columns, I'm going to have 3. Unusual on a very narrow page like a portrait A4, but you could do it if you wanted to. 2 columns would be the norm if you have a portrait style. What if you don't have portrait? What if you have landscape? All right, so that's going to be the last thing we're going to show you in this video, is how to put a landscape page in the middle of a portrait document. Perhaps you have a very wide table that is difficult to read on a narrow page, or you have an image that you want to give a little bit more width to. Notice here that we have some page numbering things happening here. We'll look at that in the next video. That's because we've inserted continuous section breaks and it's confusing the page numbering. All right, let's go down a little further into our document. Let's go down to chapter 4. And let's say that I want to put, oh, no, chapter 4 is too short. All right, no, let's work with chapter 4. Let's say that at this point, after chapter 4, I want to put in a nice wide table to make some point. The next table holds a lot of information, right? But it's a really wide table. I am going to use section break next page. Now you cannot use section break continuous for this, because if you have 2 settings on the same page, one landscape, one portrait, the software doesn't know which one to apply. You cannot have 2 competing or contradictory orientation settings on the same page, because it doesn't make sense. So you're going to create a single page. I'm going to say next page, and I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to basically carve out an isolated page within its own section. There it is. Blank page, and then blah, 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 some more stuff. Zoom out and you can see what's happened there. I want to put my sexy table on this blank page, but it's a wide table. So I sit inside this blank empty page and I go orientation, landscape. And can you see that because I bookended this page with new section breaks, not page breaks, I can change the page orientation inside this section. And that allows me to go, fantastic, insert a nice wide table. And I can put lots of information on my table. And then my document continues very happily in portrait afterwards. If you delete that section break, careful, because the landscape setting is going to disappear. So be careful that you don't delete your section breaks, because with it you will lose your special settings. Now, because sections have their own properties, you'll have to set out all your sections carefully and think about which ones must copy the others and which ones must be different from the others. Because sometimes a section is for a strangely oriented page, like this one. Sometimes the section is for columns, as we just did. Sometimes the section is for a new chapter so that you can change the header and the footer, as I'll show you in the next video. So you don't always have a nice, neat one-to-one correspondence between chapters in your thesis and sections in your document. You might have some subsections inside a chapter, in which case then you'll want to make sure that the page numbering and the text at the top and the bottom stays nice and consistent inside those sections that build your chapter, even though there's more than one section present. All right, we're going to stop there for this video. The next video is going to talk about headers and footers. We'll talk a little bit more about this page numbering situation, and I'm going to show you how you can have very useful metadata visible on your page. Your examiner will love you for it, because straight away they can look at any single page of the document and go, oh, I might be on page 89, but I can still see this page. I mean, especially if you print it out and a gust of wind catches the stack of papers across your desk, or the dog comes through, or the child, or whatever else happens. Having good headers and footers allows to reconstruct a disassembled printed document, and it just looks a lot more professional. So we'll look at that in the next video. For now, that is an introduction to what sections can do for you in your document. I hope you found that useful. See you in the next video.